Monday afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Hope you had a great weekend. Thanks for joining us. NFL Network's Tom Pelissaro, what he's heard about the Browns' perception of their rookie quarterback, Shedeur Sanders.
I know that, there was news made of him getting a speeding ticket for going 101 miles an hour. What I've heard in terms of him being in the building has been all positive. They really like Shedeur. He works hard. He's got a good personality. All that stuff has been good. There are probably things, we talked about this, Rich, a lot before the draft, where, again, I'm not blaming this incident on anything else, but it's, the questions were about how is he going to do when he gets outside of the environment of having his dad there with him all the time? How is he going to do when there's different accountability structures here? He said all the right things. He's done the right things in the building. You'd like him to make better choices, obviously, off the field. Maybe this is just a very early kind of wake-up call that, hey, these things are going to happen. You can't do that, Rich, if you're any quarterback in particularly when you're a fifth-round pick who, if your name weren't Shedeur Sanders, would be going, is that guy even going to make the team? I don't think that's going to influence the decision here. It's something that I'm sure they've addressed internally, but it's all part of the growth process.
And when you're the quarterback and when you're a rookie, all eyes are on you, and you really don't want to do those kind of things. All right, Shedeur's brother, Shiloh, in Tampa with the Buccaneers, has the off time like Shedeur does, just walking and talking to the camera a little bit.
We out here in Tampa, we got to be careful crossing the street, especially if Shedeur's out here.
Only a brother could get away with that. All right, ESPN's Field Yates. His thoughts on the Browns' rookie running back, Quinshon Judkins.
Judkins has an incredibly clear path. He's an awesome prospect. He had 14 touchdowns each of his 2 years at Ole Miss. He's a much more effective pass catcher than you probably realize if you just saw him last season at Ohio State. They didn't really need him to do that because they didn't really need either running back to catch passes when they had Jeremiah Smith and obviously Emeka Egbuka and Carnell Tate, a guy who could go in the first round next year, just an embarrassment of riches. But Judkins is, he is a powerful, fast, strong dude who, I don't know, man, feels like an NFC North running back. He just does. He reminds me of a guy that is going to, the lake effect wind is going to be hitting in early December, and Quinshon's going to go off for, 23 carries in a game where the Browns just need to grind it out rather than throwing the football 40 or 45 times.
We'll talk more about the Browns' rookie running backs coming up just a little bit. Another one of the rookies, Harold Fannin Jr., went to high school at Canton McKinley, then at Bowling Green. Talked about playing his best in big games in college.
What you did against Penn State, what you did against Texas A&M, what you did with 17 catches. You and I were talking about this last night in a bowl game. Those big moments meant a lot. What do those big games do to you?
Man, those big games, man, before the game, it gets me fired up, the whole week, I'm really excited, Pretty much, you always told, you ain't really got nothing to lose, and you ain't got really nothing to prove, and, you just really just let it fly, whether I'm right or wrong, you really can just let it fly because everybody think you're supposed to lose, so you just go out there with a full 100% confidence, and you really just make them prove it.
We'll talk plenty about the Browns coming up with Dalton Wasserman as well as Tim Bielik. Also a little bit about the AFC North. Let's move on to the Guardians. Guardians trying to make it 2 out of 3 against the A's as they wrap up that West Coast trip and come home. And another great start. Slade Ciccone went 7 innings, gave up 6 hits, 3 strikeouts, 1 walk, and 7 shutout innings against a pretty good offensive team in the Athletics. Second inning, Gabriel Arias singles out into left field. That will bring a run in to give the Guardians a 1-0 lead. Still in the second, Guardians not done. Nolan Jones starting to hit the ball and starting to hit it well. This one's trouble into the right field corner. It will go as a double. Arias will score on the play. It'll give the Guardians a 2-0 lead, and he is safe. In the 5th inning, Guardians at it again. David Fry, an RBI single to left to score another run as the slide is again safe. Guardians get the shutout over the A's 3-0 to take 2 out of 3 in the series. Slade's Coney, another really good start for Stephen Vogt and the Guardians.
He's added in the cutter a little bit, but his sinker was really good today. Landing the curveball, using the slider. Slade pitched today. He got quick outs, got some punch outs when he needed to, and it just seemed like he wasn't slowing down. His velo was there the whole game. He does a really nice job on and off the throttle with the velo, with the fastball, and he and Hedgie just got into a good rhythm. Like I said last night too, that this is a really good offense here with the A's, and for us to keep them off the board, that was huge.
We had a chance to win the series today, getaway day. Everybody always wants to win a little bit more on these days. So Hedgie called a fantastic game. He kept me engaged. We got that lead, and he, basically said we're going to start mixing heaters and sinkers. They're aggressive. Let's get early outs, and that's exactly how it went. A lot of credit to the pitching staff too. This week we made a little tweak on the sinker to allow me to execute it a little bit better and be a little more deceptive with it, and it really paid off with some ground balls early today.
So it's the second series in a row that the Guardians have taken 2 out of 3, still not hitting the baseball, haven't scored over 4 runs in a game in those 2 series. They come home. They'll open up a 3-game series tomorrow with the Blue Jays at Progressive Field. Logan Allen scheduled to get the start, and it will be Eric Lauer from Midview High School who is scheduled to start for the Blue Jays. Again, Guardians coming home tomorrow to face the Toronto Blue Jays. ESPN's national NBA analyst Brian Windhorst on what the Cavs' biggest priorities should be in this offseason.
Their biggest priority is to try to retain Ty Jerome and Sam Merrill. The reason that the Cavs were able to get Ty Jerome in the first place is that the Golden State Warriors couldn't afford him anymore. They couldn't afford him as a backup, so the Cavs were able to take him. The Cavs are in danger of the same thing. Their payroll is so high that the rules are purposely designed to squeeze some talent out of them, and that's definitely a concern. And Sam Merrill too. Sam Merrill is a guy who's unrestricted, who's an excellent, 38 or so % career 3-point shooter. Those guys are desired in the market, and he's not going to cost, tens of millions of dollars. And if the Cavs are still waiting for something on Jerome or deciding on Jerome, it's a possibility they could lose Merrill while they're deciding. It is a good problem to have that you have a 64-win team where all of your star players are locked up to contracts and you're worried about protecting your 6th and 9th men.
And again, draft right around the corner. There's some thought that Okoro and Dean Wade could be guys that you trade in order to create some space to keep Merrill as well as Ty Jerome. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Browns are up first. Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. On the other side of the break, stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. Browns are up first on Sports4CLE. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Yeah, this is Jim from Southern Ohio. I've been a Browns fan for a long time, and I keep hearing that DeJuan Jones is going to make a really good left tackle. Well, what happens if Dylan Gabriel becomes our starting quarterback and he's left-handed? Does that move DeJuan to the right side? Just asking. Somebody needs to clarify that for me. Thank you.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. So, Tim, the thought is you have the left tackle's job is to protect the blind side, which left tackle would be for a right-hand quarterback, right tackle would be for a left-handed quarterback. It's not an easy switch. It's about you have to flip everything that you do. So DeJuan Jones was at right tackle. You moved him to left tackle. I think you're leaving him at left tackle if in fact he shows he can do that well.
100%. I think part of the reason also you mentioned not just the idea of when you're a left tackle, you have to invert everything you do to play right tackle and vice versa. It's the fact that I think the importance of the right tackle has kind of climbed up to where it's almost at the level of the left tackle. Yeah, the left tackle is the most important position on the offensive line, especially when you have a right-handed quarterback. I get the concerns, because if you go to Dillon Gabriel, since he's a lefty, the idea that you would have to invert things on the offense. But I think just because the value of needing not one, but two really good offensive tackles on the line is become so much more important over the years that, it would be best that if Dillon Gabriel's the starter to keep DeJuan Jones and Jack Conklin where they are and, just let them continue to master those respective sides of the offensive line. Try not to mess too many things up because then you also run the risk of not just individual technique having to be adjusted on the fly, but also chemistry that has to be, readapted and reorganized and reworked, I should say. So I understand the notion, no question about it. There's just a little, but to answer the question, I would probably say, just keep DeJuan Jones where he is, regardless of the starting quarterback.
Yeah, and what you have to identify this year, I think it's probably more important because I think quarterback, we'll get into that in a little bit. You got to figure out, is DeJuan Jones a starting caliber tackle, and is Martin Emerson a starting caliber cornerback? Those are two huge things you have to answer this year.
Yeah, and I do think Martin Emerson's worthy of being a starter. I do think, 2024 was just a down year for him, and it happens to a lot of guys. There were certainly things on the defense that, were outside of his control, why he struggled. I still put some of those, problems on the offense being as ineffective as it was for why the defense ultimately just, was not able to come close to the same standard it was. But with DeJuan Jones, yeah, there's certainly pressure on him because when you look at next year's draft class, and yeah, a lot of people talk about the first round pick the Browns have, that it could be for a quarterback, but we also have to talk about the second one they have. Say if they're able to keep it, then all of a sudden you're looking at what's a very deep tackle class, led by Caden Proctor from Alabama and a couple guys from Utah, Francis Mauioga from Miami. Just a handful of guys, to name a couple guys who could certainly be first-round caliber guys. Obviously, we've got a whole college football season to go to see how guys, move up and down based on how they play, who breaks out, who takes a step back. But right now, it's looking like a pretty good offensive tackle class in 2026. So with the Browns still needing clarity in the offensive line, I've talked so much about how you kind of have to rebuild this unit on the fly. This is kind of when you want to see what DeJuan Jones can be. Can he stay healthy? Can, now the fact with him slimming down a little bit, how much can it help him play on the left side where he showed some promise before he got hurt last season? Those are going to be big things, I think, for him going forward to prove that, he can be a guy who can start for the next handful of seasons at tackle.
Yeah, you bring up another good point. He's been banged up each of the first 2 years, so you don't want to. You want to make it real simple. Do this, master this position, and then we'll figure it out. Field Yates from ESPN was asked about the chances, what he thought the chances were of the Browns keeping 4 quarterbacks.
I think they could because of what you discussed, right? It's not like, hey, you're carrying 2 $10 million quarterbacks and you got to figure it out. And I just think the reality is that now, if you can get something of value for Kenny Pickett or Joe Flacco, and you don't think one of those two guys is going to be your starter, then you probably that solves the issue for you pretty quickly. I could be wrong here, but assuming things go okay during the preseason, as in like neither of the rookies comes in and gets absolutely just looks terrible in multiple preseason exposures. Like, yeah, if you don't want to keep that player on the 53-man roster, like I just don't think they're getting through waivers. I mean, I would be very surprised if Dillon Gabriel gets through waivers. He's a 3rd-round pick, right? Like Shador, there's different circumstances. There just are. We all know what like. Part of, there are pros to being the son of Deion Sanders, but clearly there are factors. That's why he went in the 5th. It's one of the reasons. Everything else, the specter outside football.
I could see them keeping 4 quarterbacks. I think they would be able to get one of those 4 on the practice squad. If you're concerned, if you didn't draft Shedeur Sanders because you were concerned about what he was going to bring to the building and he was going to make all kinds of noise as a backup, why would you put that on a practice squad?
Yeah, there's no point to it. Plus, I would just think, if the Browns they chose to waive him, I don't think he's getting back to their practice squad. I think there's enough talent there where, yeah, I get that he had this, shocking draft fall that he fell all the way almost out of the top 150 entirely when, way back in January, we were talking about him we were talking about potentially going number 2 overall. So certainly there would be a market for him. I doubt he would make it that far to clear waivers and end up back on the practice squad. As for the 4 quarterbacks, I had a hard time thinking that made a lot of sense, mostly because I feel like, we got to expand the rosters a little bit anyway. 53 still feels way too small for this day and age. But, just kind of going back to Fields' point, the fact that all 4 of these guys are making almost nothing as far as cap charge goes, and the fact that it's much easier to find, a backup corner who can play special teams in a pinch, or depth, or an offensive line body in case you need a couple guys. It's much easier to find those guys than it is to find a quarterback who you need to step in and provide for potential injury, who could pick up the system very quickly, develop some chemistry with guys, and be able to at least produce solid play. And I doubt if they had all 4 quarterbacks, all 4 would make it to the end, because certainly we all know the NFL. We all know there's going to be a quarterback or 2 that gets hurt, and then all of a sudden teams would look at the Browns and see Kenny Pickett or Joe Flacco. Maybe there's an offer that comes around and it gets the Browns an extra draft asset going forward when you still need to add more young, inexpensive talent to this roster in the next couple of years.
So we've heard a lot. People are saying they need to find out what they have with the 2 rookie quarterbacks. I understand that. I approach it a little differently. I've been saying I think the Browns franchise quarterback, they don't think it's on the roster right now. Now, if Kenny Pickett or Shedeur Sanders or Dylan Gabriel go out and play really, really well, then they think about it. But remember, Baker Mayfield, that mid-range between 15 and 20 in the league wasn't good enough. So I think their quarterback of the future is likely in the draft. ESPN's Field Yates talking about the Browns' positioning in that 2026 draft.
What team is better positioned next April to be in a position or to be in a spot to draft a quarterback? The answer is nobody, because the Rams also have 2 first-round picks. The Rams are focused on winning the Super Bowl this year, and the Browns, I think they want to improve. Obviously, right? You picked number 2 last year. You had a 2nd overall pick. Yeah. I look at this roster and I look at this division and I think to myself, like, there's a chance they could be, 6-11 this year or something like that. Yeah. And I loved the bet on Jacksonville's downside. I loved it. As difficult as it is to not have Travis Hunter as a Cleveland Brown. Yeah. You might have Mason Graham and you mentioned some of those quarterbacks, the Norris Sellers, Arch Manning, Sam Levitt from Arizona State, Cade Klubnik from Clemson. There is this crazy draft. Drew Aller from Penn State, you mentioned. Garrett Nussmeier from LSU. At this point of the scouting calendar, the biggest difference between this year and last year's class is twofold. One, there are a couple of players who, if they stay on a trajectory, have such freaky traits that the upside is bigger than any quarterback, or at least in the same breadth as Cam Ward, who went 1st overall this past year. The second thing is that, we always say, like, hey, what quarterback is going to make that Joe Burrow or Jaden Daniels leap? There are so many more candidates this year compared to last year.
And again, we've talked about that before. Who's it going to be? I'm not sure. There will be somebody from that group that plays their way into, wow, this guy's going to be a really good NFL quarterback.
100%. And I do want to go to something Field said about Arch Manning. For all intents and purposes, I've got a quarterback, top 5 ranking coming up in the next week or 2, I think. For all intents and purposes, I'm not including Arch Manning in any of these discussions, any of these mock drafts, until there's any indication he's going to come out in this draft, because it seems like the most popular take is he's not going to. That's the belief, based on some of the reporting that's out there. And for a guy who's thrown not even 100 passes, unless he has a Joe Burrow 2019 type season, there's no reason for him to go into the NFL. Now with guys getting extra money from NIL, he should stay in school, get that extra year development, because you're seeing that with a bunch of these other guys. Field mentioned Garrett Nussmeier and Drew Aller, two guys that are going to be in my top 5 that easily could have been in this past April's draft that are both going back. The guy I love the most in this class is Lenore Sells from South Carolina. I mean, I just got a chance to watch some of him actually just yesterday, and he is one of the most unique quarterbacks you'll ever see. 242 pounds, fast, ridiculous arm talent, strength, accuracy. Just got to work on his decision making and cut down on the turnovers. One guy that he didn't mention that I'm really intrigued to see now that he's in the Big Ten is Fernando Mendoza from Indiana. People might not know that name because he played at Cal last season, but this is a really enticing quarterback. 6'5", 225, incredibly mobile, put up really good numbers for a Cal team that has typically not been very good. Got sacked 40 times, but we know whether that's on him or Cal's offensive line. I don't know. So I'm excited to see how he looks at Indiana. We saw how good the Hoosiers offense was last season with Curtis Rourke. With Fernando Mendoza, you're talking about a guy who has legitimate first-round talent going to a team in Indiana that's suddenly, one of the more intriguing programs in the Big Ten to watch. So bottom line is, there's no question there's going to be a lot of really good quarterback options for the Browns. Question is, are they going to be in a position to get one of those guys based on either where they finish or where Jacksonville finishes at the end of the season?
Tim Bielik and I can step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
At the Ohio Lottery, we make Keno fun your way. So go on, pick your wager. Will it be $1, $2, $10, or more? Your call. Then it's as easy as picking up to 10 numbers. Use any inspiration you like. You can even tag on the booster for a chance to boost your winnings up to 10 times. Every few minutes across Ohio, 20 out of 80 possible numbers are drawn. And if enough of yours match, you win. Keno is always fun your way.
We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave, Frank from Cleveland. I got a couple things for you today. Don't you think we should start at least trying to get Jamari Trash and David Bell some reps at the slot or something? I mean, come on. That David Bell, every time I see him out there, he catches anything around him. He'd be a good outlet for Joe Flacco or whoever. 2, the speeding ticket with Shador. Big deal. What's the lady's name? She moved on, but she had a DUI, and they brushed that off like nothing. That's way worse than a speeding ticket. Give the kid a break, man. He's young. Let me know what you think, David. I love you and the family. You guys be good, be safe, and God bless you.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Tim, we'll do the Shador speeding ticket. The issue is 100 miles. Nothing good happens over 100 miles. But yeah, bad decision. There were 2 of them. One of them was 91. One was 101. Let's hope we don't hear any more of that. If we don't hear any more of that, we'll chalk it up to the youth. I think Thrash and Bell have to. You got to earn. You have to earn reps. I want to see them earn reps in training camp.
Yeah, I'm with you there now. Supposedly Thrash, our reporting, from a couple of people from our Browns beat people, I think Ashley Bastock's talked about him, is Thrash has seemed like he's really had a good spring, and that's a good sign. I think, last year that we were talking that Cedric Tillman was having a really good spring. And the big thing with these young players is always the biggest leap goes from year 1 to year 2. With any player in the NFL, how they progress now that they have a full NFL offseason under their belt. They have an idea of what to expect with the regular season. They have a better understanding of the speed of the game. Now it comes down to, what did you learn? How can you progress? Where can you clean things up? Because certainly there's a void on this roster when it comes to that third receiver spot behind Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman. And if Thrash can step up, and prove that, he's certainly a talented receiver, might have gone earlier in 2024 had this receiver class been not as generational as it was. Certainly you want to you got to give guys a shot to see what they're capable of. But like you said, they got to earn it. That's what I think this camp could certainly be about, is competition. You know, go out there and show the coaches that you deserve to be out there with how you practice. Same thing kind of with David Bell. Obviously, he's coming off an injury, so you want to see how fresh, how healthy he is. And certainly he's got reliable enough hands. Just, you know, I don't know what kind of speed he has to separate from NFL defenders in coverage, but certainly has the capable enough hands to be trusted in those situations. So it's going to be interesting to see how this, you know, competition for depth goes on behind those top two guys. Not to mention Deontay Johnson, who's coming as well.
So it seems like people are really split on this. Do you think Andrew Berry tries to upgrade the wide receiver position? Relative, you know, there's a couple of veteran free agents. Or at cutdown day. And part of the reason I'm wondering this, what do you do if Jerry Jeudy misses like 3 games in a row? He gets banged up. I mean, they're so dependent, I think, on Jerry Jeudy and David Njoku that's not great.
Yeah, I think it goes back to something I was, you know, concerned about last season with Andrew Berry. Is it felt like not having enough contingency plans. And I think in the NFL, you have to have some contingency plans. And I personally would go at the receiver, and a big reason, Keenan Allen is still out there. He's still available as a free agent. Maybe he's a guy who doesn't sign until the middle of training camp. And I understand why. He's 33 years old. So, I mean, you know, when you've been in the league for that long a time, naturally, maybe you don't necessarily need that much time to get ready to play NFL football. And yeah, Allen's obviously on the wrong side of 30, but he still was productive last season. Looking at his numbers from the Bears, 70 catches, 744 yards, 7 touchdowns. That could certainly be a nice addition, another veteran piece, and a guy who can really be a mentor for the guys, like I said, like Cedric Tillman, Jamari Thrash, David Bell, a guy who has just may not be the greatest athlete, but he just knows how to get open, knows how to make plays, and a guy who's had a lot of success in his NFL career. We're talking about a 6-time Pro Bowler in Keenan Allen, a certainly successful guy. And obviously the Browns didn't draft a receiver, so I would think this is an opportunity. He's a guy that, you know, if you're still looking to add another veteran in that room, that would be a guy I would really look at, see if he can do for you what Jarvis Landry did a handful of years ago for the Browns.
So one of the rookies they did draft, Dylan Sampson, talked about his running style.
You do have a physical side to your game as well, but people have often said, hey, Quinshon's a physical guy. You're the speed guy. Mm-hmm. Do you like that? Because I would have to think that you don't want to shy away from being physical.
Man, somebody has to be something, you know? Somebody has to be something, but I just let my play speak for itself. I think at running back, in general, you have to be physical. There's not many running backs who succeed for too long without being physical. Right. You know, and there's different type of, you know, levels of it. You know, I want mine to speak out because I'm not the biggest running back, but I know the mentality that I take, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get better and make this team go forward.
You spoke earlier today when you met with the media about your why. Dylan Sampson, what is your why?
Yeah, biggest is my faith, you know. I truly believe we all like put on this earth for a reason, you know, and we're gifted with certain talents for a reason, you know, whether that's broadcasting, you know, sports, like even all of us, we have deeper talents than just football, you know, and it's our job to tap into that and use the platform that we've been given to affect, you know, positive change and really be a role model, you know. We have an opportunity of a lifetime to be a role model and lead the charge, and I don't want to take that for granted.
You know, again, I'm very intrigued to see how they use Dylan Sampson. He isn't just a finesse guy, but he's not a huge guy. So you don't want him running the ball 25 times, but 10, 15 in conjunction with Junkins. It seems like there's a plan there that we'll see as the season unfolds.
Yeah, I mean, we're not necessarily talking about a smaller guy. We're talking about just a shorter guy, you know, 5'8", 200 pounds. I was really intrigued by him talking so much about running with physicality. And, yeah, when you think of Tennessee the last couple of years with Josh Heupel, you think of this offense where the receivers are all the way out to the sidelines on both sides. You have this massive amount of space. And, when Hendon Hooker was their quarterback a few years ago with Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman as their receivers, yeah, they were like that. But the last couple of years, they've leaned on their physicality, and to be a successful player in the SEC as much now as it was, 20 years ago, you got to be physical. And that's a big thing with Dylan Sampson. He's, again, not a big guy, but certainly not afraid to, run with a physical mindset. And I think that goes back to I think that goes back all the way to, Kevin Stefanski talking so much this, since the draft about trying to become a tougher football team and adding guys with tough mindsets as runners. You obviously see that with Quinshon Judkins, Dylan Sampson. You kind of see the same thing there. Yeah, he's not as big a body as Quinshon is, but I think there's enough there where Sampson, as much as people want to see him as a speed guy, he can run in the interior and run with a little bit of physicality for a guy who, again, shorter, not smaller. I think there is a little bit there to differentiate between the two terms.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com and I are going to step aside, take one more time out of the other side of the break. We'll talk a little defense. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. Former NFL safety Brock Vereen talking about the Browns' defense and what he expects to see in 2025.
It's Jim Schwartz, and they're going to find a way. You flirt with Myles Garrett, or Myles Garrett's flirting with leaving, begging to leave, and then you give him a check that he can't refuse. That's always going to help. They bring over Joe Tryon-Shoyinka from Tampa Bay, who was overshadowed in Tampa Bay. I feel he's going to establish himself. The issue is Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah placed on PUP. He had that scary lower neck, high back injury, and he's not going to play this year. Obviously, that's a huge issue and a bigger issue than just this season. Hopefully, he can live a fulfilling life if he needs to call it, or if he does come back, make sure it's time to come back and not rush anything. But rookie Carson Schlesinger, I have him coming out of UCLA and immediately taking the place. Carson Schlesinger is going to turn heads. I thought he was a first-round linebacker. I thought the only better linebacker than him was Jihad Campbell, and I'm shocked that both of them slipped, but I'm shocked that Carson slipped to the second round, and this is the DB room that is phenomenal. Veteran guys, Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome, a bunch of first-round guys who can absolutely ball. Is Cleveland going to win a lot of games? No. Is Cleveland going to cause mayhem and make sure your offense doesn't score a lot of points even if you beat them? Yes.
Tim, it's kind of interesting. If the defense causes a lot of mayhem and doesn't allow an offense to score a lot of points, the Browns will have a chance to win games because I think they'll run the football a little bit better. But I digress. I think this defense is going to be really good.
Yeah, certainly. I feel like 2024 might be, more of an aberration than 2023 was when they were so good defensively. And then 2024, they took this massive step back to being 27th in the league defense. And I've said it before that I feel like so much of the problem in 2024 from a defensive perspective was just the fact that their offense spent so little time on the field. They kept, having to go they kept going 3 and out. They kept turning the ball over. Even looking at, Pro Football Reference, they were 21st in the league in average time per drive on offense. They turned the ball over so much, 34 turnovers on offense. They could not score, dead last in scoring. In today's NFL, you have to be able to score. And when you're asking your defense to hold teams to 17 or under on a regular basis, especially considering the caliber of quarterback they played last season when they played 3 teams that were in the win conference championship games, playing Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, I mean, you're going to struggle naturally. I mean, those are more quality quarterbacks than the Browns saw in 2023. But bottom line, I said it before, yeah, if the offense can at least be solid, if they can get points, if they can shorten the game and protect the football, I think this defense by proxy is going to look a lot better because it's just so much easier to play defense when you have a lead. It's much easier to pass rush when offenses have to pass versus when they can at least show the idea that maybe they're going to run the football if it's a tie game or if they're winning. And defense becomes much better when you can make an offense more predictable. The best way to do that, put some scoreboard pressure on. It comes down to their offense being able to produce to help out the defense.
So when you think of a Jim Schwartz defense prior to the last 2 seasons with the Browns, there's always been a defensive tackle that just gets in the backfield and just makes it difficult. Browns haven't had that. You've got Mason Graham now. You've got Michael Hall Jr., who was banged up, and you've got Malik Collins. Do you think Jim Schwartz finally has the weapon that he wants at defensive tackle?
Certainly, he's got a multiple amount of guys who have the potential to be that. And I mean, even looking back through, Jim Schwartz's history of defensive tackles, you go all the way back to his days in Tennessee. Albert Hainsworth was just such a dominant player for him in Tennessee. Then, when he was the head coach of the Lions, he had Ndamukong Suh. Then with the Eagles, when they won a Super Bowl, Fletcher Cox was a star in the interior of that defensive line. So yeah, you look at what they have in the middle. Certainly, you hope Michael Hall Jr. can get healthy and look like the guy he was becoming at the end of the season, which was a pretty darn good player. You saw a lot of exciting a lot of intriguing plays by him. He's starting to flash more. I think he was a guy that, like most defensive tackles getting drafted, needs a little time to get, adjusted to the NFL. Defensive tackle is not a position you can really just jump in and be a star from day one. It's just so hard to do that, which is why I kind of want to I would temper my expectations for Mason Graham. If he goes out, starts, and has a really good season, I think that'd be more the aberration than the norm. And Malik Collins, this was a guy, I think this signing just flew completely under the radar. It's easy to forget this guy has been a solid contributor throughout his NFL career. So between those 3 guys, you have enough talent, I think, on the defensive interior, not to mention Jawan Briggs, the 7th-round pick last year, who I thought, looked pretty solid by the end of the season. Certainly in his own right, looks like a guy who can be a rotational guy throughout the life of a rookie contract. If those guys can perform to the level I think you kind of expect them to be, all of a sudden you have a real good interior defensive line that can really benefit with so much attention being placed on Myles Garrett.
So how concerned are you with the secondary? And I alluded to it a little bit earlier. Greg Newsome didn't have a great year. Martin Emerson didn't have a great year. Denzel Ward was pretty good, was banged up some. Is an improved pass rush all they need, or is it I don't think it can ever be as simple as one thing, but that secondary has to play better. They have to turn the ball over.
Yeah, I think part of that is obviously, when you can put an offense in positions where they have to pass, where, it's not a question of what they're going to do. When you can force an offense to be predictable by down, distance, and scoreboard, that's when I think you can really put yourself in an advantageous situation. Now, from a Browns perspective, yeah, I still have questions about the safety position. Can Ronnie Hickman play at a starter level opposite Grant Delpit? I don't have as many concerns with Martin Emerson. I just kind of chalk it up to just having a down year. Like I said, those things happen with guys throughout NFL careers. I'm not as concerned because we've seen 2 really good seasons from Martin Emerson. I'm not that concerned, with 1 year not being a good one, especially when so many other guys did not have good seasons. And I feel like in some ways secondary play it can be aided much more than anything by having a productive pass rush. And like I said, what few things help a productive pass rush, like being in an advantageous position and playing with a lead. I think about that Super Bowl. Part of the reason the Eagles pass rush was so dominant was because they had that lead and they forced Kansas City to have to throw. And when the opponent has to throw, you can just pin your ears back and get right after them. And it's when you have that mentality as a pass rush, when they're going to pass and your job is just rush like crazy to get after him, it makes your life a little easier to create that kind of havoc. And from havoc usually comes turnovers.
Yeah, and that's one thing the Browns defense will be focusing on. We've heard about it already. Tim Bielik, it's always great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Tim.
You got it. Thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day.
Tim Bielik, make sure you check him out. cleveland.com as well as the Plain Dealer. Always good stuff. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. We'll continue talking Browns. Dalton Wasserman from Pro Football Focus straight ahead. Stay with us on Sports4CLE.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
At the Ohio Lottery, we make Keno fun your way. So go on, pick your wager. Will it be $1, $2, $10, or more? Your call. Then it's as easy as picking up to 10 numbers. Use any inspiration you like. You can even tag on the booster for a chance to boost your winnings up to 10 times. Every few minutes across Ohio, 20 out of 80 possible numbers are drawn. And if enough of yours match, you win. Keno is always fun your way.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Former NFL head coach Eric Mangini talked about Shedeur Sanders getting multiple speeding tickets. This from The Herd with Colin Cowherd.
Look, I got a speeding ticket the first night of the draft, my first year there. I thought maybe I'd get the benefit of the doubt, but they gave it to me anyways. So they're pretty aggressive with the way they patrol the highways in Ohio. And this is, in fairness to Shedeur, this is the first time he's been outside of his dad's overview of his dad's house. I mean, I think he was his high school coach, and then he was his college coach. And this is like any kid who's away from home for the first time. Yeah, there's going to be a couple hiccups here and there. And do you want back-to-back speeding tickets? No. The Mr. Raymond, I would imagine his lawyer was supposed to take care of that. Typically with speeding tickets, you can sign something and get that handled. I don't love it. I don't love it from a fifth-round draft pick. I don't love that it happened multiple times. But I do think that this is the first time he's been away from his dad. And, there's going to be some growing pains. Now, would I sell my stock on it like you are? Not because of a couple speeding tickets, especially in light of the problems that Brown's quarterback room has had to deal with legally in the last few years.
Let's welcome in Dalton Wasserman, PFF data analyst, co-host of the PFF College Football Show. Dalton, I can't argue with anything that Eric Mangini said. It's kind of the way I view it. I will say 100 miles an hour is kind of a conscious decision, and nothing good happens. Like I said, over 100, probably over 75. It's just, don't do that. But again, it's a 20-something-year-old kid.
Been there, done that. I get it, Dave. I've gotten a couple myself now, not in a while, of course, but sure, back when I was 22, 23, gotten them also. But look, I think we didn't expect to be talking about speeding tickets in the middle of June, and that's where we're at with this NFL news cycle. But with Shedeur, first of all, when you're a quarterback, everything's magnified more than it is, for anybody else on the team. And then when you're Shedeur Sanders, everything's extremely magnified. Every move he's made has been under a microscope for the last 2 years and counting, right? So, look, obviously, is it an error in judgment? Surely, would you like to see errors in judgment from guys who are supposed to be leaders on your team? Not necessarily, but there's guys in the NFL who have done a lot worse and gotten a couple of speeding tickets. If he learns from it, pay the fine, go through the process like the rest of us do, right? Then it's really not a big deal. You just don't want to see those repeated patterns of mistakes.
Absolutely. And you want to make sure the focus is on football and getting better. This is from CBS Sports. Curious as to your take on this. This is ranking the top 10 off seasons. They said the Bears had the best, then the Patriots, Vikings, Broncos, Commanders. Rounding out the top 10, the Colts, the Eagles, and the Browns, able to identify potential building blocks on both sides of the ball, the likes of Mason Graham, Quinshon Judkins, others, while clearing a path for other young players on the roster to prove their merits with extended playing time. In addition, drafting Dylan Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders, Cleveland added first-round selection in next year's draft to potentially identify and draft their quarterback of the future. I think it's kind of interesting. I think the draft class I'm really intrigued by. I think it could end up being really good. But I get where there are some questions because 3 wins is 3 wins. And I think they were better than that. But, you know, to quote Denny Green, you are what your record says you are.
Yeah, look, I think when you make a case for the Browns having a quote-unquote good offseason, I think it's about turning the page, right? Just cutting bait with Deshaun Watson, moving into the future, understanding that they're not going to win a ton of games in 2025, most likely, unless somebody emerges at quarterback that wows everybody and the offensive line is healthy and looks like a top 10 offensive line. But I think otherwise, when you look at turning the page into, okay, they'll give this group of quarterbacks a shot, and if none of them work, then you have 2 first-round picks next year to work with. Now, some of the perception is going to come down to how productive is Travis Hunter in Jacksonville, and should they have just taken Travis Hunter? Sure, but they also re-signed Myles Garrett. They got what I think is a great player at defensive tackle in Mason Graham. It's still a very good defense. There are things that need to be worked on long-term. Quarterback and offensive line are the 2 things I think about, but as long as they commit to it and commit to the long-term project, I think we don't need to be looking at wins and losses so much in 2025 for the Browns. I do like that they turned the page this offseason.
All right, so you also did a thing on the running back rankings, the unit, the running back units, if you will, for the NFL. Ravens 1, Lions 2, Falcons 3. You had the Browns at 29 ahead of the Bears, Giants, and Cowboys. Take us through how you arrived at that and why the Browns are in the bottom 5, if you will.
Yeah, I looked at every team and looked at the top 4 options that each team had at running back, right? And I think what you have for the Browns, and you really look at 3 guys, is Jerome Ford and then the rookies, Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson. And look, those 2 rookies, I really like them. They were 2 of my top 7 backs in the draft, but you're in the NFL now, and it comes with the uncertainty of, okay, these guys are still rookies behind a suspect aging offensive line. And Jerome Ford is a rotational guy that I like, but he got just over 100 carries last year, a little over 200 carries the year before. So it's not like he's a game breaker or anything like that. Do they hope that Judkins can be that workhorse down the road eventually? Absolutely. But the uncertainty of having basically a rotational guy and then 2 rookies behind him is kind of the reason for the low standing in those rankings. It could be higher by the end of the year. I think there is some potential, but right now there's just not a whole lot of proven in that backfield.
All right, another thing, and this one's very interesting. Every team's make or break player for the 2025 season. You went with who the Browns hope becomes the left tackle, DeJuan Jones. Let's, for a minute, if he shows he can play left tackle, how big is that for the Browns?
I think it's huge. I mean, you're talking about a league that considers the left tackle spot and really both tackle spots nowadays as premium positions. And you look at the rest of the Browns offensive line, all 4 of the other projected starters are going to be at least 30 years old by the time the season starts. Jones is that 5th guy who isn't, 24, 25 years old. He's got potential, obviously a massive frame, but he's got to stay healthy and put it together for a full season. So I think the make or break element for him is twofold. One, the Browns finding a franchise left tackle, or even if they have to move him back to the right side, eventually a starting caliber player that can work for them into the future. And Jones is a guy who's getting later in his rookie contract and needs to prove for himself and his own career's sake that he can be a starter in the NFL. So it's twofold, both individually and for the team. But the Browns are desperate for young offensive line talent, and Jones looks like the most immediate solution if he can play well.
So when you look at this offensive line, and we mentioned they're old. Joel Bitonio talked about retirement. Jack Conklin came back and played really well. Posick was another guy that's kind of up there. Teller's getting up there in age. If in fact they're going back to the wide zone, the Kevin Stefanski thing, they brought a Bill Callahan disciple to be the head coach. If they go back and are middle of the road, how big of a lift is that to this offense? If they go back and are an NFL average offensive line,
It's a huge lift, honestly. I know that's one thing that we always talk about with offensive line play in the PFF building is, look, if you're bad, creep your way back to average. And if you have an average offensive line, you can start to do some things, right? Because it affects both the running and the passing game. I think especially with those running backs we talked about before, you want that unit to move up that list that I made. That's exactly how it's done is you get in that zone blocking scheme and you start blocking better and you're just healthy for the full 17 games, right? I know it's hard to keep all 5 guys healthy for the full season, but the teams that are able to mostly do that generally have pretty good seasons up front. So it makes a whole big difference for the offense, for the running backs, for young running backs that you're trying to create holes for, and then quarterbacks, right? I mean, you talk about there's a potential that 1 or even 2 rookies are going to play this year. If those guys are protected, you at least give them a chance to succeed, unlike last year when the offensive line and the quarterback spot and really the entire offense was a disaster, but in large part because they couldn't block anybody.
Dalton Wasserman from PFF and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. We'll talk a little bit more about some wide receivers, and we'll go around the AFC North with some news. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
At the Ohio Lottery, we make Keno fun your way. So go on, pick your wager. Will it be $1, $2, $10, or more? Your call. Then it's as easy as picking up to 10 numbers. Use any inspiration you like. You can even tag on the booster for a chance to boost your winnings up to 10 times. Every few minutes across Ohio, 20 out of 80 possible numbers are drawn. And if enough of yours match, you win. Keno is always fun your way.
We continue talking Browns with Dalton Wasserman from PFF. Mike Florio on the outlook for wide receiver. Keenan Allen, still a free agent. This from NBC Sports Pro Football Talk.
I think that this is a situation where he'll sign at or before the start of camp. Part of it is coming to terms with the fact that the days of making $20 million a year are over. He's going to have to take whatever he can get. He may have to wait for an injury to get the kind of money he's looking for. You got to process it. 5 stages of grief. He knows he's getting closer to the end. It would be hard to take another job in the same industry you've worked in your whole career, making a fraction of what you made at the height of your powers. That'd be hard to do. There's got to be a cutoff there. There's got to be a number below which you'll say, I'm not going to do this. And I think every player has that number. Would Keenan Allen really play for the minimum if that's all that's available to him? I don't think so. The Steelers make sense. They still need help at receiver. I know. They've got Robert Woods. And there's talk that Calvin Austin III can be the number 2 receiver across from DK Metcalf. I feel like they still need somebody else. They're taking a hell of a risk. I thought maybe they would consider trading for Allen Lazard. We've addressed that in the past. There's a chance Lazard doesn't want to go there. That Lazard wants to make his own way as a member of the Jets, where they're putting a premium on blocking, which at 6'5", 225 he can do. But Keenan Allen is available. Other receivers are out there. The Steelers need to consider someone like Keenan Allen, and maybe they will, and maybe they'll sign it. But I think he'll be on a team at some point in the first 2 weeks of training camp.
So, Dalton, Browns probably need a veteran wide receiver as well. If you look at the quarterback situation, if you're Keenan Allen, you're probably a little bit intrigued by Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, a bit. And I think you're intrigued by the fact that there could be a shorter path to playing time. When you look at the Steelers right now, the only proven star option, obviously, in their receiving room right now is DK Metcalf, right? You have a speed guy like Calvin Austin, who's kind of inconsistent. Robert Woods, like was mentioned there, right? They traded George Pickens away. So there is a path to playing time for a guy like Allen in Pittsburgh if the Steelers are willing to do that. And again, the middle number, or whatever the negotiating number might be on a contract for a 1-year contract for a veteran like Allen, that might be the sticking point either way, because even with Aaron Rodgers, they're not paying him a ton of money, and they don't have a ton of money to just go and spend, right? So I do think it would make sense as a veteran. He is coming off his worst year, just over 700 yards last year. It was really the first time we saw that Allen looked like he was starting to slow down, but I think he does still make sense to at least give a shot through training camp and through the preseason to see what he has left in the tank, especially for a team like the Steelers or the Browns that are very thin at receiver.
What do you think about the fit for Aaron Rodgers in Pittsburgh? I mean, it's different.
I have mixed feelings on this, because you have a team in the Steelers that they succeeded throwing the ball downfield, throwing the deep ball downfield to George Pickens last year with Russell Wilson. He was actually the highest graded deep passer in the league for us last year, right? And Aaron Rodgers really saw a lot less effectiveness than he's used to throwing the ball downfield, really checking down a lot, throwing a lot of slants and letting things happen after the catch. So I think you maybe have a different style of quarterback with Rodgers than you would with Wilson, although you have the same style of receivers with Metcalf and some other guys who want to get vertical. So there is a different style. What I'm worried about more so with Rodgers is this new lack of mobility, obviously with him being in his 40s now and the Steelers really being in flux at their offensive tackle spots. He's not as mobile as Russell Wilson, obviously. I'm in between on this. I think it could be a good fit if they're looking to make their offense more efficient and move the chains more often, but they might lose some of that explosiveness that they had with Wilson and Pickens, for as odd as that sounds.
So another stop in the AFC North, the Bengals. So Trey Hendrickson and the Bengals are now talking. Not sure how well that's going. And Shamar Stewart is a contract mess with the rookie. What are your thoughts about those two? Do they get done? And that defense, it looks like it's challenged a little.
Yeah, it certainly was last year. They played better down the stretch, than their 5-game winning streak they ended the season with. But I think Stewart gets figured out eventually. There's a lot of posturing with this, and who knows what kind of precedent the agent and maybe even the players using it is trying to set with this, with voiding guarantees and things like that. But I think, look, we haven't seen a rookie negotiation this tense in a while, and I think that'll get settled before, the season starts, obviously. Hendrickson, I'm not as sure on, because there's been reports about the Bengals preferring a 1-year contract with Hendrickson and then figuring it out later next offseason once again. Obviously, Hendrickson wants long-term security on top of money up front for the production he's given him for 4 years. So that one might drag a little bit closer to the season. If I had to bet, I think Stewart gets done before Hendrickson, but Trey could take it right down to the wire at week 1 there. We saw it last year with the 49ers with Trent Williams and Brandon Ayuk not showing up basically until the week before week 1 started. Trey could be in the same situation, because if they were going to trade him, it feels like they would have done it by now. I think they're going to figure something out for him to play this year, but I don't know about beyond that.
Same thing with TJ Watt. That was another one. I would imagine that gets done sooner rather than later, but why hasn't it?
Look, it's these edge rusher markets right now with the money that Myles Garrett got. And you've got this weird triangle of big name edge rushers, right? Hendrickson, Watt, and Micah Parsons out in Dallas too. Each one of these guys is going to want to reset the market, right? Parsons has been elite throughout his career. Watt's been elite throughout his career. Hendrickson just led the league in sacks last year and has been spectacular the last 4 years. I mean, you're talking about elite guys that are almost playing chicken with each other, going, okay, who's going to sign for $41 million? Who's going to sign for $42 million? Who's going to be the next highest paid guy after what Myles Garrett just got, right? And just the explosive amount of money that edge rushers have been getting lately. So I do think it feels like it's not just within each team. It's that each one is waiting for the other, but they're all going to set some sort of one or two of them are going to set a record with the money they're about to make. I think Parsons especially, but there's a lot of factors that go into it, especially with Watt being a little bit older, but I think that's going to get done probably even sooner than Hendrickson.
So Ravens signed Jair Alexander. If they can keep him on the field, how good of a signing is that? And are the Ravens kind of a notch above everybody in the AFC North now?
I would say so. I mean, they certainly were last year. They proved it last year with the way they beat on the Steelers in the playoffs, and obviously the Bengals and Browns missing the postseason. But this Alexander signing is really good if he's healthy. When he's on the field, he's still very, very good. I don't know if he's a top 10 corner, but he's probably top 20. And when you look at what it does for their secondary and the improvement of their secondary down the stretch last year was the biggest reason they really went on that big run in the second half and won all those games and eventually lost in the divisional. But you look at Jair Alexander, you look at Malachi Starks, the first-round pick coming in, it looks like as long as they're healthy, their secondary is complete once again. They lost Brandon Stevens in free agency. Ardarius Washington tore his Achilles in the spring, so they lost a starter there, but they have Starks to replace him. You look at their front five and their secondary, if Alexander's healthy, they could be really, really good again.
What about Lamar Jackson? It's got to be confounding for the Ravens. Regular season is great, and then you get into the playoffs, and he doesn't look like the same guy.
sometimes you just have to break through. And just one of these years, you have to break through. I remember all those conversations about Peyton Manning back in the day, right? And it took him, 9 years, I think it was, to win a Super Bowl himself. So I think Jackson, one of these years, it feels like it just has to break, right? Even this past one, right? He struggled early in the game, but he brought him down. And then Mark Andrews drops a 2-point conversion. And who knows where it would have gone from overtime from there and how they would have played the Chiefs the next week in Philly. But you just have to keep taking swings at it, right? Front offices and head coaches, they say it all the time. Keep taking swings. You have one of the elite quarterbacks in football. He's a future Hall of Famer. You got a future Hall of Famer in Derrick Henry. You've got a good defense. Just keep rolling with the talent you have and taking more swings. Eventually, it feels like he's going to break through. We just got to wait for that to happen.
Before I let you go, I'll bring it back to the Browns. They need a lot of young guys to come through. How good do you think this draft class can be for Andrew Berry and the Browns?
I think it can be really good. I mean, when you talk about the quarterback situation being what it is, and that was the strange part of the draft, but you look at the rest of it, Mason Graham, I think, can honestly be a top 10 player at his position. Carson Schlesinger needs a little polish, but he can fit in a solid linebacker room. And then I look at the two running backs, Judkins and Sampson, and they're both really talented. I know the spotlight's going to be on Judkins as the higher pick, but Sampson could also add to that depth in that room and really give you a good 1-2 punch for the next few years. So it can be really good. It would help if one of the quarterbacks somehow emerged as a starting caliber player, but I think otherwise they drafted some really good players as well.
Dalton Wasserman, Pro Football Focus, as always. Great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Dalton.
Appreciate it as always, Dave. Thank you. Dalton
Wasserman, make sure you check him out. PFF. He's data analyst and the co-host of the PFF College Football Show. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.